Hey everyone, welcome to another modern deck today. Red-green TarmoBlob. A deck, well I can't say it's really a deck archetype, but a deck idea I came up with late last year and I wanted to try out. Basically trying out Consuming Blob in Modern because I think it's a pretty funny card. And I came up with this list. Before we get into it though, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down below. And that like button and maybe even that notification bell. Those 3 clicks go a real long way in supporting my channel. Really appreciate it. Alright, so here's the list. So you all know I love TarmoBlob, of course I do. And Dragon Race Channeler has grown on me as well. I love that card, and graveyards are usually very important in decks that I build, or in a lot of decks that I build. And when I saw Consuming Blob, I was like, okay, not as good as TarmoBlob, but hey, it creates duplicates of itself, so it just kind of gets worse and worse and worse over time. 5 mana is kind of steep, but in the right deck you could get there pretty easily. So I decided to take a shell I've used quite often. It's kind of like that. It's kind of a Ponza shell with some modifications of yours truly, and you know, enough ramp in there that I'm pretty comfortable at getting 4 and 5 mana consistently. And I came up with this list, and this list served me pretty well. I had a lot of fun with it. There's 3 matches going up today against some fun decks, and so stay tuned for those. And I just had a fun time denying my opponent of some resources and putting out big dumb creatures that just beat them silly. And let's take a look at the main creatures, which I'm calling the Synergies here. Dragon's Race Channeler obviously has Delirium, pretty graveyard dependent. So I mean, this is a very graveyard dependent deck, apart from Ulvenwald Oddity, which is your kind of your get out of jail free card if your opponent brings in graveyard hate. And of course you have your, TarmoBlob, which you've seen in basically 90% of my decks, and Consuming Blob. So really quick, Consuming Blob power is equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number plus 1. So very similar to what TarmoBlob is, except it just looks in your graveyard as opposed to both. But here's the kicker. At the beginning of your end step, create a green ooze creature token with this creature's power is equal to, well, it's basically a duplicate of Consuming Blob. And every turn, as long as your opponent doesn't take care of Consuming Blob, it kind of gets out of hand. And, fine, Consuming Blob doesn't have trample or flying or any form of evasion, but it becomes, you could start having 3, 4, 5, 4 5s on battlefield. So you just, all of a sudden, you're playing like an 8 TarmoBlob deck or a 10 TarmoBlob deck. And I'm perfectly happy with that. And Ulvenwald Oddity, actually, if anything, kind of steals the spotlight from Consuming Blob here. I wanted to try Ulvenwald Oddity as well. And again, this creature, once it hits the battlefield, oh boy, like, you don't need to get to 7 mana really to transform it. Just a 4/4 trampling haste creature is enough for your opponents to kind of go crazy with. Also performs stellar in this deck. Like I said, I really had a lot of fun playing with this deck. I really think you should try it out. So let's get to the matchups real quick. Against combo, really unfavored. You don't have much here against combo. Land destruction or Blood Moon is really your only way of slowing them down enough to beat them, but it's just not a matchup you want to be playing against often or at all. Mid-range decks and aggro decks, relatively even overall. Again, you're playing relatively big creatures yourself, so you can kind of keep up with that. You have a decent removal package, and you're playing Pillage and Blood Moon, and you have a lot of access to other cards in red and green in the sideboard, so you can deal with the aggro and mid-range matchups pretty easily. Control decks, again, really unfavored. You don't have too much in the way of stopping them from doing what they're doing, which is denying you from doing what you want to do. You have Veil of Summer in the sideboard, and you could play other cards like Choke if you really wanted to kind of slow them down. I didn't, but again, generally speaking, it's an unfavored matchup. You also have Tron, really favored, just purely out of the main board, Pillage and Blood Moon. They're gonna have a lot of trouble with you, and Tron was just super easy in my testing with this deck. And last but not least, Borderline Magic. Well, it's just even. I mean, again, you could do Resource Denial. You have relatively big dumb creatures that just kind of pound in, and you have a pretty good matchup against most of those weird, barely magic decks. And that's it for Red-Green TarmoBlob. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with this deck. I really think you should at least stick around for some of the matchups to see how it performed. It really doesn't rely on Consuming Blob to win, which I like, which means I can have fun with Consuming Blob without getting, pissed off that I didn't draw into it or something. When Consuming Blob hits the battlefield, It almost never gets removed, you know, if it's out of bolt range, because it's really hard to get rid of it if you don't have Path to Exile or anything like that. And it just starts duplicating itself, and it gets out of hand really quickly. So, but you don't, again, you don't really need it. Alvinwald, Oddity, Tarmogoyf, and Dragon's Channeler do a fantastic job taking care of your opponent. And that's it. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about this deck. And like I said, stay tuned for those matches. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe and hit that notification bell down below. Those few clicks go a really long way in helping others find my content and helps my channel grow. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook, share my content on social media. That also helps others find their way to my videos and spreads the word even further. And of course, if you like making money, check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of this video. In particular, check out the Patreon rewards program. Basically works like this. You give me your Patreon dollars every month. I buy and open up sealed product on this channel using those dollars. And I send you back that money at the end of every year in the form of rares and mythics. You get one non-bulk rare or mythic for every consecutive month you've been a patron, and every card is worth anywhere between $3 and $15. But I mean, even if you lowball it at an average of $5 per card, you're at the very least getting your money back, but odds are you're getting even more. There are a lot more details on my Patreon page, so check it out. Thanks and have a good one.